During the pentagram rite, I saw a green neon face outside to the north. And then there was a presence that came from the north and followed along about a foot or two west of the cat, and then went behind me as I finished the pentagram rite. With the first set of vibrations, I saw the glass fill with bright orange light. Then, about the same size as the glass, on each side, east, west, south, north, was a blob of green. And with the third set of vibrations, the glass seemed to fill with little bones. At least they seemed little. They seemed human. And then with the fourth, there was a cone, a blue light coming off from the top. And with the fifth, it was like there was laser light of blue that came off from the scrying focus across. And during the final scrying, I heard, while the final reading, I heard something like some sort of warped crows and owls outside, and almost a whispery sound. And eventually, the euphoria came over me like a storm during the final scrying, as yellow sparklies swarmed. Antigonus and Eclogue reminds us that having different views than what's considered to be orthodox is not the same thing as being anti. Of course, some people are anti. And what are the different views on God and such that people hold? Myth is more than fact. It's more than psychology. Essay on Continuity reminds us again that history should not just be something of tracing out facts, although things do have a relation to them. They do connect to what the basic facts are. Knowledge of God reminds us not to limit our sense of deity to even the cosmic form. Mock Beggar Hall, a progression, is between a poet and a philosopher. Reminds us of a sense of meaning that needs to be worked out sometimes, in addition to the narrative. Some will see the Jews as representing spirit, and some will see the Romans as representing flesh. Certainly in the biblical narrative, you kind of get that perception that it was love of the world that made people be different. But then again, these people tended to consider the spirit as involved in the beauty of life. A week later points out that there's a difference in ethnic ways, and perhaps that's why we have the differences, not that people are more or less against religion or spirituality. It's just they've fallen into certain ethnic ways. How does it relate to life? Religion, art, and the harsh realities of what is done. A month later, the voice of conflict drives things along. We've stepped away from the time where we can blame ghosts for possessing us, because certainly if they do, well, we still have our choices. Commandments may be political, and what takes place still involves our choices. Fate is not the same thing as there's no choice in the matter, because our opportunities being fated and the outcome being known doesn't mean that our choices didn't bring it there. The rainbow and the skeptic reminds me of some of the Upanishads. There needs to be a variety of teaching, and we need to connect things to our own personal power. Alice makes one think of something that people don't usually think of. Is Alice in the Looking Glass, Alice in Wonderland, that sort of thing. Well, it was sort of a motif, and it wasn't just one author that referred to that. It refers to a Victorian sort of way, and how that and some other things were coming to an end, and people may look back in a keepsake box sort of way. Burrs and brambles reminds us that there are forces to, people may say, guide us. Other people will say misguide us. The features we have to encounter are not always pleasant, and we do have to do what we must. From our ghostly enemy makes us think of how guidance is at hand. We do need to seek it out and study it, and we need to act in the real world. Death and the farmer reminds us that the work of maintenance, well, that continues, doesn't it? And of course, there's an ultimate maintainer. Ovid in defeat reminds us that when it comes to the other, the opposite, whatever you say for the other gender than yourself, well, a lot of that is what you see in yourself, what you demand of yourself. And how, well, ultimately who you rely upon is yourself. Diversions, thanks the editor for making a exception to his general rule. And the artist that wants to get their art out there certainly has to do things in a way that stand up to analysis. And how looking at certain trends may be important in sharing our message. But I would remind people that when it comes to that sort of thing, what you need to do is not compromise the consciousness or the principles. The kingfisher's return makes you think of birds and all that returning and how the ecosystem works together. But then again, we're referring to a bird being stuffed. So, love without hope reminds us to love. It may go by, but, take that opportunity. And by love, I don't mean the same thing as an action, because a lot of people are going to confuse that. Traveler's curse after misdirection. Well, when it comes to curses, just don't curse because something you're not sure about, right? You better mean it. You better know they deserve the curse. And generally, when you do curse, you should make it something that's not going to prevent good or prevent benefit for yourself or others, or it doesn't close things off if it's so granted. But people, think of details by details, right? And of course, this is put in a context that, assuming that the flaws in directions, or the misunderstanding of directions even, was some sort of thing against his religious journey. Tilly Kettle reminds us that traditions of what needs to be depicted or what can be depicted may not be something to uphold. And that's where the memory is continued, the legacy of an individual. And sometimes it's not so advanced as it seems, but, it could be something. The college debate can point us towards the talk about, are we going to be antiquarian? Are we going to over-focus on modernism? Perhaps it should be neither. And certainly, regardless of our material culture, I think we can connect to the Celtic spirit, you can call it. Tennyson is another author that I mention on this channel, and that's mentioned repeatedly in things. Sergeant Major Money. There's a couple books that Robert Graves wrote as historical fiction for the American Revolution. And I honestly think when it comes to his historical fiction that he does a little bit better than Little House on the Prairie. Definitely better than something like The Da Vinci Code, which is even less historical. But people are like, oh, dude, he put 2 pages in his book worth of information. Oh, no. Sergeant Major Money. Reminds us that, well, we probably shouldn't be mercenaries. We shouldn't be such individuals that our refuge is money alone. But the new idea of warfare is based on salary. Now, that had been offered since ancient times, but it's no longer about, your country or the principles involved. You're defending some sort of freedom or security or something. A letter from Wales reminds us that there's a difference between figuring out identity and having some sort of doubt in your philosophy. And the difficulties of wars and with conflicts of thought, well, yes, you can bring out a new art, and that's how you may work through things. The presence, well, the decaying presence is always present, isn't it? The clipped stator reminds us that even the best of leaders have to deal with dissent. We're, of course, talking about Alexander the Great, and there's been a lot of attempts to form a spiritual connection. Certainly, the Greeks and some other writers talked about shrines and perhaps entities that were involved in his birth and that sort of stuff. Of course, some of those stories are invented to excuse adultery. The poetic state reminds us that art might not just be, oh, well, they've trained themselves towards this thing. And angelic and demonic are sides that are picked. And when it comes to positive and negative and all that sort of stuff, well, that's sort of on a different plane. Vanity. Well, I think of the dragon much like the Kundalini thing. You say sounds and stuff like this, you vibrate and all this, and you can literally see your aura like it's some sort of rainbow dragon. But part of this reminds me of the tarot card, the Tower. At the games, kind of like what we went over with our last program, which afterwards I saw that flash above me as I walked away from this building. Nowadays, a lot of the talk about competition between nations has been put into sporting events and media competitions. Oh, who makes the best movies? To M in India is something that, of course, gets into a lot of M's, and it implies that there could have been a tendency in Robert Graves at times towards Islam. He was an individual who, didn't want to be too conservative, you could call it. It wasn't about church for him. And the Marmoset's Miscellany continues the M theme, and that was what I was talking about the reference to Muhammad. And in the first bit, he mentions going beyond proof and not proof. Someone was commenting about King Jesus, and I haven't read King Jesus, so I don't know. The safe are Erewhon rendezvous. Continues things. There's been a part 2 before that. And the colleges of England, the peculiarities about its language, certainly have shaped its jumble of putting the learning of the past forward. Of course, one of the things that we should be getting into is not the mere trivia. And Tailpiece completes this series. Let's just call this number 60 in the stanzas. And sometimes it's not about what's proper, because ethics and morals aren't the same thing. Let's remember that. A moment of weakness might be intemperance. A temperance for the situation of others. A temperance in not being too restrained. The country dance calls for the Dionysian over the Apollonian, and reminds us that there's a time for which to stir emotion. The rose and the lily reminds us not to spoil what's ours through the dispute with others.